Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa. I'm Rochelle Harrison-Pless. Thanks for joining us. Coming up, Ethiopia's Oromo region on edge as fierce anti-government protests continue. The UN human rights body repeating its calls to send in independent observers. I'll have more from our correspondent in just a moment. The ballots are being tallied in Morocco after voters went to the polls in a parliamentary election. The moderate Islamist PJD party is hoping to hold on to power. And surf's up in Nigeria. We meet the man who's catching waves after opening the country's first ever surf school. But first up, it feels like a war zone. That's how a resident described his hometown of Adama in Ethiopia's Oromo region, which has been rocked by anti-government protests. The violence on the outskirts of Addis Ababa has seen the UN Human Rights High Commission repeat its calls for access to areas where demonstrations have erupted. Also this Friday, the Ethiopian government says that several factories and dozens of vehicles were damaged in attacks by what it called anti-peace forces. For more on this story, let's bring in France 24 correspondent Karim Lebour. Karim, a very good evening to you. Anti-government protests have really intensified in the last few days. What more can you tell us? What's the mood like there?
We intensify to the point that it's impossible to list all the incidents of the last few days because there are so many. Protesters have now turned their anger on foreigners. A tourist resort has been completely burned down south of Addis. At least 11 mainly foreign-owned factories have been set on fire in a single industrial zone outside of Addis. And foreign embassies have called their national not to go outside of Addis because they fear the weekend will be extremely tense. These protests have significantly intensified since the deadly stampede last Sunday during a religious festival in Oromia, and that was really the trigger that triggered this outburst of violence we have witnessed in the last few days.
Well, today the UN human rights body repeated its calls for access to those areas rocked by protests. It says independent observers should be allowed in. What's the likelihood of this happening?
No chance at all, really. Ethiopia has so far refused any independent investigation on any of the deadly incidents over the last year. Prime Minister Haile Mariam has repeatedly said that it's a matter of national sovereignty. And this has really angered protesters because there is absolutely no attempt to even start a dialogue on the government side. And what is happening really is, especially since the stampede last Sunday, is that the government is running the risk of completely cutting itself off from the Oromos, who are the biggest ethnic group in Ethiopia.
OK, Karim, thanks very much for bringing us up to date with that story. France 24, Karim Lebour reporting there. A brazen attack in broad daylight. In Niger, 22 soldiers were killed after a group of at least 30 gunmen targeted a refugee camp in the western Tawa region. The camp is sheltering some 4,000 people from neighbouring Mali. The assailants targeted a military post near the camp, a spokesman from the country's defence ministry saying they were most likely jihadists. The attackers fled in a stolen vehicle after seizing weapons, food and medical supplies. Now, Zambia's opposition leader has pleaded not guilty to unlawful assembly and sedition charges. Hakainde Hichilema was arrested on Wednesday alongside the vice president from his United Party for National Development after they attempted to visit party members in detention. Hichilema is set to appear in court later this month and, if convicted, faces up to 7 years behind bars. Back in August, he disputed the results of the country's presidential election, which handed a narrow victory to incumbent leader Edgar Lungu. A French inquiry into events that sparked the 1994 Rwandan genocide is far from over, with judges now targeting Faustin Kayumba Nyamwasa. French investigators want to interview the former Rwandan general who fled to South Africa in 2010. Kayumba Nyamwasa has accused the country's current leader, Paul Kagame, of involvement in the assassination of President Juvenal Habyarimana, his murder igniting ethnic tensions and sparking the genocide, which saw the slaughter of some 800,000 Tutsis. Next, Moroccans went to the polls this Friday to elect a new parliament, the second time voters cast their ballots since the country ushered in constitutional reforms in 2011. The moderate Islamist Justice and Development Party, or PJD, is hoping to be re-elected to government, but its main rival, the Authenticity and Modernity Party, has thrown down a challenge. Well, for all the latest on this story, let's cross to France 24's Chris Moore, who's in Rabat for us. Chris, good evening to you. Now, the polling stations are closed. The ballots are being tallied. We'll have first results tomorrow. Tell us how the vote went today.
Well, both the main protagonists you were talking about there saying they're largely satisfied with the way things panned out. It was in many ways portrayed as a contest between those two main protagonists, the PJD, which has carved out a niche for itself with an image as the anti-corruption party. It says the PAM is too close to the royal household. The PAM's been countering by saying that their Islamist opponents have been seeking to make society more religious, even encourage extremism. Now, in terms of turnout, the latest figure we have is from about 2 hours before the closure of polls, and we're looking at something between 30 and 40% there. Back in 2011, it was only 45%, all of that in a country where a third of potential voters are not actually on the electoral roll. So a huge part of the Moroccan potential electorate not turning out here. In terms of where we go next, we're expecting results to start coming in on Saturday. There is likely to be a protracted period of negotiation. After that, however, 30 parties standing and negotiating a coalition government could take some time.
OK, Chris, thanks very much for that. France 24's Chris Moore reporting from Rabat in Morocco. And finally, Nigeria may not be the first country you think of when it comes to surfing, but with hundreds of kilometres of unexplored coastline, the West African country has potential as a prime spot for surfers. At least one man thinks so. God Power Peki Puma has opened Nigeria's first ever surf school. Luke Shrego has the story.
Surf school in Nigeria's Tarkwa Bay, and everyone has to start with the basics.
Stand up. Nice.
God Power Peki Puma is not just a fan of the sport, he runs Nigeria's first surf school, having fallen in love with it when he was younger.
When I saw it, I was like, how are these people doing this? How are they standing on the board? So I just admired it the very first time when I was a kid. And I said, wow, this is really amazing. I really like to do this. I really want to learn this sport.
15 years of experience later, he decided to teach his skills to others, with mixed results. Even France 24's Rosie Collier fancied a go while she was in the area.
Tarkwa Bay, where we are, is a beautiful location in a very, very big mega city of Lagos. It's a great place to come and get away on the weekend, but rather than just lying on the beach, obviously I don't need a suntan, then I thought let me come and try some surfing and get fit in the meantime.
Lessons cost $16, $9 if you bring your own board. In fact, that's a real problem at a destination not exactly known in surfing circles.
I don't have surfboards because to get surfboard here is from South Africa and it's very expensive. It's an expensive sport to do.
Peki Puma is not shy about how he intends to gain exposure and get his hands on the gear he needs. He wants to become a member of the International Surfing Association, not just learning new skills, but one day representing his country in international events too.
That's it for now. I'll be back in 45 minutes with more African news. Stay tuned. Live from Paris continues in just a few minutes.